If you're going to say goodbye to New York, you might as well do so in style. 140,000 tickets for 2 shows at Shea Stadium had sold out in 2 hours. The open-air sports arena, home of the Mets baseball and Jets football teams, was the site of a celebrated Beatles show back in the mid-60s. It hadn't been used for a rock concert in 6 years, before last week's farewell. For, after 18 years, The Who, the one-time Shepherd's Bush mods who became arguably the best live band of them all, have decided it's the beginning of the end. Their current American tour is their last, in the country where they've built up an almost religious following since the 60s.
I was sewn up like a coat. I took a smile at the bottom of the wind, watched the fresh fall of snow. I knew then that my life to return. I felt strong and secure. And when a piece of tape over my nose, I felt almost demure. Goodbye, Sister Disco, with the flashing trash bags. Goodbye, Sister Disco, to your club and your jazz.
New York responded to the event in typical New York style. Who news on television, Who displays in the record stores, and Who nostalgia for a career that's always seemed even wilder and more spectacular here than it has in Britain. For Americans, they were nothing to do with London youth culture, mods or pop art. They were the band who in '67 startled even the hippies at Monterey by smashing up their equipment. A suitably theatrical start to a career that would go on to include epic rock operas and films like Tommy and Quadrophenia. 15 years on in New York, the Monterey generation had brought their then unborn children to see the band.
67, I was there with him in my belly.
So you weren't
about
even born
3
then?
days before he was born, and when the Who came on, he was really kicking very hard. I guess he was very excited by the Who's music, and so this is very monumentous for me because it's 15 years later, and here he is with me at the Who concert at Shea Stadium.
So you weren't even born when they first came here. What did you think of them?
I think they're the best. They're number one in my book.
Great. They're the best band.
The Who was excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
Yes.
The best. The best.
Pete Townshend, guitarist, songwriter, and the elder statesman of British pop music, is now 37. He first expressed his dislike for touring back in the 70s, but was persuaded to stay on the road by singer Roger Daltrey. Over the past couple of years, he's had a well-publicised fight with drink and drugs, from which he's now recovered. Does he really mean to stop touring now?
I'm pretty sure that I won't change my mind. I think to some extent we've achieved everything that we set out to do, and most of that we achieved in the first 8 years of our career. And then we sat back and quite rightly started to get paid for what we did in the first 8 years of our career, and to some extent that's what we're doing now. We're going out and playing to audiences that are coming to see us for what we've done in the past and for what we represent within rock and roll, not for what we're effectively achieving today. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, part of rock concerts is the celebration thing and just the general everybody patting one another on the back mood that you get, but I don't think anything creative is happening at these Who concerts. They're bloody good concerts. We've done some fantastic shows. But there's no new ground being struck. And I need to strike new ground.
I can't imagine you stopping writing songs.
No, I don't think I'll ever stop dealing with music as well. I think to some extent, one of the things that has left me with a great hunger has been the fact that music is what's fired me up to begin with, not lyrics. It's a great high, music. It's a pleasure, And I suppose at one point in my life I was steered off more into the direction of words and statements and oratory. And I want to get back to music.
Pete, we're going to Shea now for the last Who show in New York ever. What do you feel now about what you're about to do?
It's very difficult for me because I have what they call sort of an abreactive nervous response, like David Sylvian of Japan.
What's that mean?
Well, it means that before you go on stage, you fall asleep. In other words, my nerves for a show manifest, I go down instead of up. So I kind of get into a kind of a blasé attitude, you know, where I don't feel any tension.
So the fact this is goodbye to New York with the Who?
In a way, goodbye to this place. I've never been here before. I mean, I'm looking out of the window at it now. I don't like the look of it. I'll be glad to say goodbye to it. I'm saying goodbye to it now. Bye-bye, Shea Stadium. I'll never see you again. You know, I mean, who needs it? You know, I never wanted to be a baseball player. You know, when I started to play, when I was a young kid, I wasn't interested in being or becoming what I'd become. I wanted to be a member of a band and play music, that was all. There were certain things on the periphery that I thought were exciting. The idea of being seen to be a little larger than life, getting a bit more attention, getting into the back door of clubs without getting in the queue, all of which I enjoy to this day, but they're not, it doesn't matter. I don't mind getting in a line with anybody else.
One of the fascinations of the Who has always been the apparently contradictory personalities of its members. Townshend, the tortured, caring rock intellectual. Their original drummer, the late Keith Moon, a manic comic and eccentric. Bass player John Entwistle, the sinister, quiet one. And singer Roger Daltrey, the far tougher frontman, who spent his mornings in New York working out in a gym.
I think the age decides it. I mean, I'm getting on for coming up for 39, and we wouldn't be able to tour the States now for another 2 or 3 years, and I'm not going to do it when I'm 42. It's hard work staying in good shape. It really is. And I just don't want to go downhill. I think it's great to end on top. You know? I mean, what are the Stones going to do now? I feel the state of Utah. I mean, how can they top what they've done? It's crazy.
Was this your decision, Pete's decision, or how was it actually arrived at?
It's really my decision. Along with, I mean, when Pete got ill last year, I felt a bit responsible for that because it was me that dragged him back on the road. And I think
you were always wanting to go touring, and he wasn't wanting to go touring.
Yeah, that's it. And I think the touring had something to do with him getting into drugs and the booze. So. I'm really glad that it's finishing. Christ, I don't want to lose another band member just because we've been selfish enough to keep the man on the road for the rest of his life. It's not worth it, you know, it really isn't.
I desperately want to be seen for what I really am. So I overcompensate.
Which is what?
Well, I suppose I open up too much. You know, I tell too much about what I'm really about. I tend to sort of treat interviews as very much as confessionals rather than as anything else, and because I'm trying to bring myself down off the plateau that people are putting me on to some extent, and that's why I would never leave England, because I feel that over here I'm treated as you know, a piece of plastic product, and in Britain people just think of me as Pete Townshend. You know, sometimes he's up, sometimes he's down. I never want to see a big arena again. You know, these places weren't built for rock and roll. They weren't built for music. Maybe they were built for rock and roll. Maybe rock and roll has become like baseball and ice hockey. You know, I mean, I don't feel right when I come off.
Too safe. Too predictable?
Well, I don't know about safe. I was just going to say I don't feel right when I come off with the Who unless there's blood flowing from some orifice of my body. You know what I mean?
I hate the bloody road. I love the stage. So I mean, it's only the road that's going to disappear. And I mean, I've had a gutful of that. I really have. I mean, we've been doing it for 20 years, and unlike the Stones, who went into exile for 7 or 8 of those 20 years, we've been doing it for those 20 years. And I really have had a gutful. I mean, it really is. It's unnatural, and when you get families, it becomes even more unnatural.
Daltrey and Townshend are both married with families, which is why they want to come off the road, but still make records and give the occasional Who concert. John Entwistle loves the touring.
I get most of my satisfaction from playing on stage. Although I may look bored to tears on stage, I really enjoy it. I enjoy playing to an audience. I mean, to me, being a rock musician is showing off to an audience.
Their idea at the moment would seem to be that this is the last tour, but there would be the occasional show, and that would be a way of keeping it going. You wouldn't?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to sit around and wait for the occasional gig to be thrown at me. I'd rather find another way of getting on stage continually, or at least like 6 months of the year.
So if you won't do that, there really is the end of it.
Yeah, there is a definite end in sight.
The trouble is with John, he never tells anybody else what he feels. We have a meeting with the group, and it'll be Pete and I talking, and the other two sit there like, dummies, and then we find out how John feels through the press, which is all totally wrong. And I really don't think John's thought it through. I don't think he really thinks of where the Who should go, what the Who should say, or anything. Just what John Entwistle wants, which is not particularly good for the Who.
So he hasn't told you any of this?
No.
Stuck in the middle is the manager.
The Who have been almost legendary for their bickering and disputes among themselves. What have they been like to manage?
Pretty difficult. I don't...
Are you a sort of referee between all the different factions?
Yeah, I suppose I am. I suppose I've got the deciding vote. If we reach a stalemate and it's 2 against 2, it's always been felt that I should have the deciding vote. But it does get quite explosive sometimes. We've had our fights. I don't know, I suppose I'm just as crazy as them in some ways, to be doing it. Because it affects your whole life.
The Who made good records, particularly in the 60s and early 70s, but they'll be remembered most for their live performances. Next year, if this really is the end, there'll be farewell shows in Europe and Britain. But what will they do themselves without the Who?
Well, I'm getting more into the acting. I'm working for Jonathan Miller for the Beeb next year.
Doing what?
The Beggars Opera, which is quite interesting. And there's a film I'm going to hopefully direct next year.
So what are you going to do with yourself now then?
I don't know and I don't care, basically.
Really?
Yeah. I'll be so pleased. I mean, I've really quite, at the moment, my sentiments is that I want to get as far away from rock and roll as possible.
Looking back over all those 20 years, what are you most proud of in all that?
Staying alive.